Laid out on this table are the parts that make up the 6-liter M120 V12 engine from a W140 Mercedes-Benz S600 that I'm on a mission to restore. But before I can rebuild the first V12 from Mercedes-Benz, I need to overhaul almost every single part that I've removed. And that's what this episode is all about. Let me show you what has to be done. This is the short block, and I'm happy to say these alusil cylinder walls show almost no wear. And since the internals of this engine are very clean, there's no reason to tear it apart any further. So a lot of elbow grease and a minor service is about all that it needs. At least that's what I'm hoping for. To overhaul the cylinder heads, I need to tear them apart, inspect the valve seats, the valve guides, and then we can see what it will take to rebuild them back to factory spec. For the tandem hydraulic power steering pump, I have a rebuild kit from Mercedes. No one has fully rebuilt this pump before on YouTube, so it should be a fun side quest. It's also rebuild time for the alternator, new bearings, new voltage regulator, and as you can tell, it would have to be torn apart just for the cleaning alone. For the AC compressor and the smog pump, we need to thoroughly put them to the test and inspect them to see if there's something that can be reused. Here we have the parts that will be going in for aqua blasting. Just in a few minutes, you're about to see these parts transformed into better than brand new. The valve covers and the intake manifold are no longer aesthetic, which is unacceptable. Not only are they dirty, but the factory coating is failing, so they will need to get the full treatment and get it finished in the OEM colors. We also have the front subframe assembly sitting here, needing quite a bit of attention before we can reinstall the engine. Loads more of miscellaneous parts, all needing attention in one way or another, so let's dive right in. Before taking these in for vapor blasting, I need to strip them, remove the seals, gaskets, sensors. Let's do it. Remnants of the oil pan gasket. What a stubborn seal. O-rings for the cooling channels. The water pump gasket. That was the hardest water pump gasket to remove maybe ever. And it's still not all off. The blasting will remove that. Now the gaskets to the upper timing covers. These were the biggest oil leakers. Yeah, like plastic. Let's see how these camshaft seals come out. Much easier. We'll be replacing all these sensors for the coolant temperature. Someone used silicone here before. Not a good idea. Very crusty. Alright, that's coolant manifold and piping ready. I'm taking these parts to a local Porsche restoration shop called Urban's Garage. They're one of the few in the country that have an aqua blaster, so after a few days, this is what I got back. This is better than Christmas, probably. I've been looking at this parts for probably about 20 minutes at this point, so it's time to get back to work. When it comes to impressive visual transformations, we're not stopping here. Restoring the magnesium valve cover is not as easy as you might think. Magnesium, if left bare, corrodes and gets ugly very quickly, so these covers are coated inside and out, and on both sides the coating is failing. And not only is that a cosmetic issue, it's also a functional issue, because the valve cover gasket and the spark plug tube seals seal against a painted surface, and when that paint is compromised, the surface becomes uneven and can't seal anymore. So to restore the valve covers, I'm having them soda blasted, then powder coated all around with a high zinc primer and finish the paint coating up top. Now the aluminum intake manifold is also painted from the factory, so it need to be media blasted and powder coated. I did some of the tough masking for the media blaster, so no sand could get in. And with that, the parts went off for powder coating, where they ended up spending over a month, and these are the results. Alright, let's tear these heads apart, see the condition, and see what it will take to rebuild them. Now, when inspecting these hydraulic tappets, you want to make sure that the face is smooth and shiny. You can see some wear points in the middle, but that is completely normal. I did check all of them, and they are all about equally nice. So now they are stored upside down. And the pores in the head are also very nice. Let's get started on removing the valves. I want to do the exhaust valves first. I want to see what those seats look like. I taped up one side of the tool to not cause any scratches to the tappet pores. So I'm compressing the valve spring. Removing the valve keepers. Now I can release the spring. And the spring. Now the valve can pop out. Yeah, we do need a valve job, as expected. The valve stem, I would not be surprised if it's out of spec, but the machine shop will have to check that. We do have some valve stem wear, hopefully not too much, but most definitely we'll need a valve job. Now on the intake side, I'm hoping things will look much better. This is where you can clearly see the contrast between the intake and the exhaust valves. This is completely normal. It's just that the exhaust valves have a much more difficult life. And the same goes for the valve seats on the cylinder head. The exhaust side will need a valve job, while the intake side can probably get away with a cleaning. Let's remove these valve stem seals. Old and worn out valve stem seals are one of the main reasons why older engines burn oil, even when they're well maintained. Super important to replace them here. And now the valve spring seats. It's about time to remove the spark plugs. This is after 2 hours of ultrasonic cleaning, and as you can tell, one is much nicer than the others. And that's because I actually soda blasted this one before, but I wasn't happy with the result, so I went with ultrasonic cleaning. But it turns out that the combination is extremely effective. So I'm going to soda blast all of them and then do this again. And same treatment for the intake valves. The machine shop made short work of these heads, and they were back home in about 5 days. The heads are back. Overall, pretty good news because, as expected, the exhaust valves and valve seats need to be cut, all 24 of them. When it comes to the valve guides, the machine shop first thought that they would have to be replaced on the exhaust side, but then they changed their mind, said there's no reason to do it. So save some money there. Of course, they were resurfaced and cleaned pretty well. So that concludes the cylinder heads. They are ready to go back on. It is time for something exciting. Measuring the head bolts. So these bolts are reusable up to a certain point. So from the factory, they are 168 millimeters long, brand new. Up to 171, we can reuse them. So over 171, it's over for these bolts. So let's see. Save a lot of money if they are reusable. This one is exactly 168. It's like 168.5, 168. These haven't been stretched at all. Yeah, they're all 168. I wonder how many times could you reuse these because they have not stretched at all. It is camshaft inspection time. When inspecting camshafts, you mainly want to look at 3 things: the journals, the lobes, and the sprockets. Now the journals are where the camshaft rides on the cylinder head. This is where you want to look for any kind of scratches, any kind of signs of lack of lubrication. I'm really liking what I'm seeing, very clean. Now, inspecting the lobes, you want to look at the nose of the lobes, you want to look at the finish, and you want to compare it to the finish on the sides. If there's a loss of shine on these tips, that means the hardening has worn away and the camshaft will start to wear very quickly. I've already taken a look at them on all 4 camshafts and they are looking beautiful all around. Now the sprockets is where we do see some wear. The more these wear, the thinner the teeth get. It's really useful to compare it to a picture of what it looks like brand new. You can tell some material has worn away. Only one of these is still available, so there's not much we can do about that. This is not like a serious issue. It's not great, it's not terrible. It will work for a long time. Alright, it is alternator time. The bearings are not bad. They are known to go bad on these. And of course, soaking in engine oil is not going to help. So I'm preventatively replacing the bearings and the voltage regulator. First step is to clean it up because this is not something that I can work on. First step, removing the pulley. You have the markings on the nut already there, so it can be torqued back to the same spec. We have 3 absolutely tiny bolts. We have our voltage regulator right here. You can really compare the wear on the brushes right here, old versus new. Now we should be able to split the case, remove these 4 bolts. Going to need an impact driver. Wow, it is oily. Now we have 4 bolts up front holding on the rotor. And here's the front bearing. Alright, let's swap out these bearings. Going to need this here because we can apply force right here. That is plastic. Now here are our components. We have the rotor, the stator, rectifier behind. I'm not going to be separating them. The stator especially is completely soaked in oil. And from my research, you can clean these parts in the ultrasonic cleaner. So that's what I'm doing next. Now all the parts are cleaned up, but there's a problem. A lot of the insulating varnish, especially on the cooling fins of the rotor, has flaked off. A lot of it was already falling apart, but now the ultrasonic cleaner especially removed all of the weak spots, so we need to reapply it. Almost nothing left on the other side. Alright, now wait for it to dry and put it back together. Let's install a new rear bearing. The new front bearing. Don't forget this plate, this side up. Had to go down by a level. And that is the bearings done. Let's tighten these up. Now inside the rear housing is plastic ring that fits around the bearing, just kind of positions it. It cracked and broke apart, so I have a new one. Now the voltage regulator. Hand tight for these. Markings lined up. That is the alternator done. It is fuel rail time. I need to replace the fuel pressure regulator and all the O-rings for the injectors. Finally. Clean it out from the inside. New one from Bosch. I'm installing a small amount of silicone grease on these O-rings. I'm going to soak the new O-rings in some transmission fluid. Makes it easier to install them. They are usually pretty difficult to install. You need to stretch them and press them quite a lot. Let's pull out the injectors. Alright, let's swap these seals out. I'll install new ones. This is the difficult one. There we go, 11 more to go. Fingers are completely numb after this. Let's reinstall them. That is fuel rail and injectors done. I've been looking forward to rebuild this pump for a while now. So this is a tandem pump. Power steering is on this side, on the rear, with the oil tank, and side run suspension is up front right here. When you're getting the seal kit, you have to make sure that you get the right one for your part number. You can see it right here. Mine is 140 166 4501. You can see my part number right here for the kit. We have the shaft seals because you don't want your hydraulic fluid and power steering fluid mixing. That could happen, possibly. And like I said, I don't think anyone has rebuilt this particular pump on YouTube before, so you're going to see it for the first time here. Before starting the disassembly, you guys already know what we need to do. It is super important to keep everything very clean when playing with these pumps. But now we are ready for the disassembly, starting with the power steering oil tank above. Now, right here should be a filter element that we need to inspect and clean. It appears to be pretty clean. Yeah, not too bad. Now continuing on with the pump, we have 4 M8 bolts holding the 2 halves together. So you might think there's only one seal here that you're looking at, but there's actually 2. One sits kind of around the other. Now to remove this pressure plate. Now here you can see the internals. We have the rotor, the vanes and the cam insert. And there's also a tiny circlip here that we need to remove. Hardest circlip to remove ever. Don't want it to go flying. There we go. Now our shaft, the drive shaft, should just come out. Now we can remove the cam insert, the rotor and the vanes. Ideally the vanes should not go flying. Yeah, they will want to fall out. Now ideally we would want all these to stay in the same place where they are. They will want to fall out from the bottom. No, that worked. The bearing sleeve, we have the front seal right here. Now we can remove the front flange cap right here, 8 bolts. Now the hydraulic suspension side does seem to be more dirty. We need to remove this bearing shell right here. We have a piston pressing on it. And it popped out. Piston with the spring. Now the repair manual says to tap the housing against the block of wood until the piston support ring falls out. This is what I have for wood. The other pistons want to come out as well. And I have a washer as well. Oh, there it went. Actually worked out nicely. Sealing rings here to replace. This can only go back on one way. Here you can see the shaft seal that separates the 2 hydraulic systems. If this goes bad, you're going to have the 2 fluids mixing. So definitely want to go all the way and replace this one when you're rebuilding the pump. Now that the disassembly is complete, let's check the condition of our oil pumps and the drive shaft. Starting with the oil pump on the hydraulic side. So if you had a lack of lubrication on this side, you would see wear on the side of this bearing shell. This is where the pistons push up against at all times. And you can see the wear pattern there. That is normal. And you can see the surface is completely smooth. When it comes to the pistons, they slide in and out in these pores right there. You could see wear on the sides right here. These are all good. This is how it looks like put back together. So pistons are in here and the bearing shell, as you can see, it can move around at all sides. This fits around this lobe right there and it spins. You can see how it would be building pressure. Now inspecting the lobe on the drive shaft that runs the hydraulic pump, again very clean, no scratches. This bronze bushing sits around it, so it would be taking most of the damage. It is in nice shape as well. Now the front bearing or bushing surface, this is where the front case sits like this. So inside this front cover is this bushing shell insert that the drive shaft rides on. You want to, of course, inspect it as well. You are always going to see this asymmetrical wear on this bush because of the belt pulling down on the drive shaft. So you're always going to have kind of like a shiny side right there. There is some kind of like a stain there that I can't feel with my finger. Ideally, I would like to replace this bushing, but it's not separately available. You can buy this whole front piece from Mercedes for a reasonable price, but I don't have time to wait for it. So I think it's perfectly reusable. Now we also want to inspect the rear bearing surface here. This is where it rides on this piece right there. And of course you can see another bushing right there behind that seal. You want to inspect that too, make sure there's no scratches. So far all looks to be reusable. Now inspecting the power steering oil pump. Here is the cam insert, here's the rotor and the vanes. Fits around like this. This is a more common oil pump design. Here you want to inspect the walls inside the cam insert, make sure they're all smooth. And of course the face of the vanes as well, make sure they kind of move smoothly. I'm overall happy with the condition of this pump. It just needs a reseal really, and it's going to be all good to go. So let's remove all of the seals, clean all the parts and get it ready for the reassembly. That was easy. I feel like this one is going to be more of a challenge. Let's see if this bearing puller can do the trick. That's how the bearing puller fits inside the seal. It's nice and firm. Just in case I want this extension falling and hitting right here. And that is the seal extracted. And I was pressing from above, from this side, with the extension, press it out of the housing. Very nice. Let's remove the remaining seals. We have two right there. Nice and easy. And with that, we are all ready to start the reassembly. I'm going to kick it off by pressing in the new radial seals. I think that's pretty much perfect. Now let's assemble the oil pump for the hydraulic side. Very nice. I'll try to install both at once. Now lube up the lip of the seal. Now this washer on top of the seal. Now the piston assembly. Line up the notch right there and just press it in. You don't need a lot of force, this is just the smoothest and easiest way. Now insert the bronze bearing shell. The side milled on both sides goes upwards. Now I'm going to install the drive shaft into the front housing. Lube up the seal and bearing inside. Make sure the lip of the seal sits correctly. Now the O-ring. This notch right here points upwards towards the top of the pump. At least that's how it came apart. Now we can tighten it down. And now 10 Newton meters. There is the hydraulic side all done. Now back to power steering. Let's assemble the oil pump, starting with the rotor and the vanes. Alright, so when these fall out, you have to make sure that you install them with the shiny and round side towards the outside. Very important. Now installing the cam insert. Make sure these pins slide in. Okay, now we need to install the locking ring. However, the repair manual states that this locking ring has to be replaced every single time, and you can see why that would be, because how deformed it already got when removing it. But for some reason the 130 euro rebuild kit does not include one, and it's no longer available from Mercedes. I did try to find a suitable replacement locally, but I could not find anything that would fit. So this is a slim kind of slip ring because it has to fit inside here. Your regular lock ring would not fit in there. It's also fairly thick. It's about twice as thick as your regular lock ring. I guess I'll install it and maybe use vice grips to kind of press it back into shape. Not happy about reusing this, but I think that's what it will have to be. Now installing the pressure plate. Make sure all these are lubed up. Fits around like that. Now the big O-ring. Let's torque these down. Let's reassemble the oil tank. I cleaned out the filter with brake cleaner, installed a new aluminium sealing washer. Same story for this fitting right here. So I couldn't find a torque spec for these two, but they weren't too tight, so let's go with about the same. Spec for the oil tank bolts is 10 Newton meters. That is beautiful. And that is the pump all finished up. I really had a lot of fun with this. For me, stuff like this is one of the most enjoyable when it comes to a rebuild. I almost forgot this under the oil tank. It's time to tackle the AC compressor, and I'm sure you already know what the first step is going to be. Now that it's at least halfway presentable, there are several things that I want to do here. I want to see if I can test the clutch. I want to drain the oil out of the compressor and see if there are any metal shavings. We have some O-rings here for these two lines. These O-rings are not only goofy looking, but they're also stupid expensive. 30 euros from Mercedes-Benz. Unbelievable. Does spin over nicely. Let's measure the resistance of the coil. This should be between 2 and 5 ohms. 3.6. Coil should be good. Let's give it power manually. Clutch engages. Let's take a look at the condition of the oil. If we have any metal shavings, this compressor is done. Nothing is coming out. On some compressors that is normal. You're supposed to drain the oil out from below. There is a speed sensor, so maybe it acts like a drain plug. I can see some oil. Let's see. The tiniest bit came out. that is all that we got, and I don't think it's supposed to be this brownish color. So as far as I understand, if the compressor runs low on refrigerant, the oil kind of pools up in the evaporator, which would cause what we're seeing here. Overall, I'm feeling like replacing the compressor. We have old, 33-year-old seals in here that we can replace. We have the speed sensor that is 33 years old. Of course, the pulley and the clutch and the bearing, everything. So, feel like buying a new one. Okay, so we do have a seal here. This is not in the parts diagram. Oh, I see some dirt in here. That is not what you want in your AC compressor. The AC system should be just spotless inside. New compressor it is. So I think let's tear it apart for fun. Let's see what it looks like. Let's remove the clutch and pulley assembly first. Oh yeah, there's a lot of dirt in there. I wonder how it got there. Let's remove the goofy circlip. Okay. Bearing is very quiet. And the clutch coil. Should just come apart. That does not look good. It looks like water has gotten into one of the cylinders. All the moisture in the system from all the sitting. Not good. Definitely not what you want to see in your compressor. Water in the system. The entire AC system will have to be overhauled. Alright, let's see if it comes apart any further. Oh, the rear case wants to be first. Yeah, water everywhere. Another seal that could leak, that we couldn't replace. I mean, we could replace it, but it's not available. I mean, yeah, this is the front case. I once tore apart a transmission that was underwater and looks very similar. Other side of the cylinders. This bore right here looks really bad. Pretty cool stuff. Well, that did it. This is the shaft. Found some bore scoring right here on number 2. Oh, there's one more. So this is probably not rebuildable, if I were to guess. You're not going to bore it out with oversized pistons, I assume. So this is, I guess, the consequence of sitting for 20 years with an empty AC system, all the moisture that gets in. I mean, I could see all the water. Yeah, really cool stuff. But I'll have a new compressor on order, 500 euros. Next on the schedule is a satisfying cleaning session for the engine block. So sit back, relax and enjoy. For sealing these front covers, Mercedes didn't use any gaskets or silicone. I'm pretty sure they used like Loctite 5923 for example. So let's see how it is to remove. I'm going to use this Victor Ryan's gasket remover. Works pretty good. Very nice. We have some dirt on the crankshaft sprocket here. Fresh engine oil. We don't want any surface rust building up. This is bare metal. The sprocket itself is in good condition, no excessive wear or anything. Can't forget about the rear of the engine. Now to clean the deck surface of the engine block, I have this carbide scraper, very good tool, and also some forbidden merchandise from BMW. This block is kind of like a mild abrasive. It's really good for the final finishing and cleaning of the surface. I prefer to turn the block on its side for this to minimize the amount of stuff that's going to fall into the cylinders and the passages. I will try some of this gasket remover to maybe make the job a little easier. Let it sit for 10 minutes. Now, when it comes to the deck of the block, this is pretty much the finished product. Some of you might think it's not clean enough or it's dirty or I haven't cleaned, some of these spots. I actually have. The thing is, like, some of these imperfections are so embedded in the surface, in the aluminum, that the only way to remove them is to, remove a decent amount of material. And there's no reason to do that. These won't affect the sealing at all. Let's clean the pistons. I'm using throttle body cleaner and Scotch-Brite. Now to repeat that 11 more times. We have an O-ring behind here that I would really like to replace, but as you can see, it's completely seized up. Definitely glad I was able to solve that situation. I did not like welding on the freshly cleaned engine block. Here we have the O-ring, crisp O-ring that I was after. Imagine if this starts leaking in the car and it strips out. That would be an absolute nightmare. But now I need to wait 4 days for a new one. The threads seem to be alright. Now we have exactly the same thing on the other side. Going to apply silicone grease to the O-rings. A little bit of anti-seize on the threads. Could not find a torque spec, so to go with something that makes sense. And now reinstalling the coolant drain plugs and the oil galley plug new sealing washers. 30 Isaac Newtons for this one. Now the one for the oil galley. Spent 15 minutes looking at the manual, could not find a torque spec. Now tackling the front subframe, we have quite a lot to do here. Need to swap out these engine mounts. We have the steering linkage that needs to be disassembled. I need to replace the idler arm bushings. Of course, a lot of cleaning. And as the last thing, we have these front subframe bushings. And these bushings from Mercedes-Benz are 1,200 euros for a set of them, which is ridiculous, and they are no longer available. So we need to see what we're going to do there. Let's get started. We have this thing here that is missing from the other side. I'm disconnecting the steering shock from the subframe. And now the idler arm, we have bushings here to replace. Now let's take this apart. Now the idler arm is free, and here are bushings that we are after. Mercedes did use some grease when installing these. Good to know. Now let's get the pitman arm. Alright, let's commence the cleaning. Now you might be thinking, why am I not pressure washing this? The reason is because I don't want to cause an oil spill in front of my garage, and also I don't actually have a water kind of outlet. It will take a couple of days to have it installed, so don't have that time. Now regarding the 1,200 euro bushings, there are some good news and bad news. Good news is 3 out of 4 are looking really nice. The rubber is barely showing any age, can't see any cracks even, looks really good. However, one of the front ones is different. You can see the crack here on one side. Now when I twist it around, it doesn't seem any more flexible than the other side. It's more of a superficial crack, hopefully. So my thinking is these are 33 years old and there are no good aftermarket options currently. I'm thinking they're going to last another 33 years. So, going to keep these. I gave the same treatment to the other side. There's some factory wax coating here that I didn't see any reason to remove, so that's why you see some of those dirty looking spots. Now to swap out the bushings, I have new Febi made in Germany. Bushings comes with a new bolt and nut as well. Silicone grease. The hydraulic press is definitely overkill, but it's just the easiest. Now the torque spec here is 120. Since there is no room to torque by the nut, I tried torquing by the bolt, but I couldn't get the heat shield to stop twisting. So at the end of it, I had to go with the torque spec of 1.5 Ugodugos. Let's install fresh engine mounts. These Febi ones are made in Germany, so hopefully not too terrible. These are the belt tensioner and the tensioner pulley. Now the tensioner is no longer available from Mercedes-Benz. No aftermarket manufacturers, nothing, not available. I think this one is reusable, so I have to clean it up. The pulley is available, but for 250 euros. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not paying 250 euros for a pulley, right? And we don't even care about the pulley, we care about the bearing, the small bearing that is in here. Now, it does have a part number, and I found it for 20 euros from a good manufacturer. So let's replace it, let's clean up this tensioner, should be good to go. Easy. Welcome to the parts washer. Scotch-Brite is also great at cleaning these oily surfaces to get the oil loose from the surface. This is the secondary air pump, and it has a problem. The pulley bearing is shot, and when I press in the clutch, engage the pump itself. I'm not sure if that sound is normal. Yeah, I would say probably not. So these can seize up while driving, which would be a really bad thing. They are not available anymore, and spare parts or instructions on how to repair them are basically non-existent. So if I can't fix this, I have to delete the entire system. All I can really do is take it apart, see if I can get the bearings and replace them. Let's start with removing the pulley and clutch assembly. I'm now marking the position of the nut relative to the shaft. A circlip right here. There we go. Another circlip. Should be it for the front. Now we can separate the rear. It's moving. We have a bearing here. Looks like very dried up grease. Here in the middle we have the paddle bearings, and this cylinder has another bearing in the front. Let's see how this comes apart. This will be fun to put back together. There we go. Number 2. Now I can remove these, I don't know what they are. So this is kind of like a spring, pushes these spacers against the paddles. Now we have just a cylinder remaining. I should be able to press this out. That might be our bad bearing. That's a lot of force already, thought it would be easier. Well, there it goes. Well, unfortunately, this is where the rebuild ends for this air pump. This is the problem with not having the repair information. Let me show you what happens. So this bearing is pressed onto this shaft from this side. Then both of them are pressed into the housing right there. Then the circlip goes in behind them, locks them in, and snaps into a groove in the pump housing. And then this cylinder is pressed into the shaft as the last piece. But since I didn't know that, and of course I could not see the circlip, by pressing on the shaft I completely shattered the circlip groove in the pump housing. And as a result, the pump housing is basically scrap, can't be reused. So I tried several different ways to separate this shaft from the cylinder, but I couldn't figure it out. So if you know how you could replace this bearing without destroying the pump, I would really like to know. But regardless, this pump is not rebuildable anymore. So at this point I have a few options. I could buy a refurbished pump. I did find one, but in that case there will still be a problem. Let me show you. Here we have the air filter for the pump. It is not serviceable, so you have to buy this entire housing as one, and is also no longer available, so I couldn't find a new one anywhere, and you can just see the condition. The same goes for the rubber hoses of the secondary air system. Half of these are no longer available, and of course, even though these are not your basic hoses, you could make something work if you really wanted to, but overall I'm not happy with the serviceability of the system. So I have decided, and the decision is to delete the secondary air system completely. There are delete kits available with a shorter belt, with block-off plates for the holes in the head where the air is injected. As a result, we will have more emissions during the cold start phase, and we will also have a check engine light. There are ways to get around that, which I will tackle later on. I won't be throwing these parts away, I will be keeping them just in case anyone wants to reinstall the system later on. It won't be too difficult to do, but for me, no secondary air injection for this rebuild. Behold the dreadful EGR system, the valves and the piping. But to be honest, if these clean up nicely with the soda blaster and ultrasonic cleaner, I will probably keep the system. This is not like your modern diesel EGR where it just ruins your life. This is a lot more mild, and I don't think it can really do much harm to these engines. And that is the EGR all done. This pipe's also cleaned up very nicely in the ultrasonic cleaner. So this will be going back on. Let's talk about the harmonic dampers situation. So in the last episode I said that I'm going to send mine out to the United States to be rebuilt. However, the company that I had in mind does not take international orders. So I was still looking for ways to kind of make it happen, but then I was Googling the part number around at 2 a.m. and I found this. On the website of a random Mercedes dismantler in Netherlands, I think. Look at the back side of it, there was a sticker. And this is an old Mercedes-Benz part sticker that they would have on the brand new parts. You can see Mercedes-Benz Belgium, see the part number, see 1998. This is an old stock harmonic damper. These are no longer available from Mercedes. Once they were over 1,000 euros. This was just sitting there for, I think, 200 euros. To have this one, the old one, restored would have been, if I was able to make it happen, over 800 euros for 200 new old stock part. Good deal. Very happy about this. Now, these lines are probably the most important in the whole car because they are for the engine and transmission oil coolers. You don't want any funny business with these lines, you don't want any leaks, nothing. They have to be perfect. It's hard to say if these were leaking or not because, I mean, the entire underside was so oily. But it doesn't matter because these are 33 years old at this point, in due for replacement. From Mercedes-Benz, these would have been over 500 euros, so stupid expensive. So I had a local hydraulics company refurbish them, new high quality rubber oil lines for about 100 euros. Very important to do preventative maintenance like this. This engine has a strange mix of a lot of parts being easily available, but also some parts that should be available are not. One of those things is the thermostat, believe it or not. no longer available from Mercedes. Aftermarket manufacturers no longer offer it. So it looks like I'm going to have to reuse this one. Didn't think I would be reusing the thermostat for this rebuild, but that's how it is. So let's go ahead and soda blast it, see how much nicer we can make it. These thick pieces of rubber are the intake manifold gaskets for the early M120 engines. Now these are no longer available because later they went to another design. This is what they were replaced with, these aluminium spacer plates. You can see they accept regular rubber gaskets from both sides. And of course those are still available. I really wish I got these in before, so I would have taken them in for vapor blasting. I guess I had settled for soda blasting them myself. And here's a few more examples of what soda blasting can do for some of your miscellaneous pots. Here are our NOx sensors. If they were available, brand new, I would replace them, but they are not. They are not biodegradable, but this plastic sleeve is absolutely falling apart due to heat and age. So I'm going to replace the plastic sleeve, clean these up, and they will be ready to go back on. That is all that we have left. At least it was easy to remove. Disintegrating crankcase ventilation piping, very common on the M120. Mercedes-Benz updated the part number of this whole piping like 4 times, and none of them are still available. I think there's an updated version on eBay for like 600 euros. Originally it was I think 200. But it doesn't really matter because I wouldn't have paid 200 euros for a few rubber hoses anyways. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure this is not rubber. This is straight plastic. How this is supposed to seal or why it's like this, I have no idea. But that's what they used. The second side, at least is bad. Now, this is the hose that I'm replacing it with. Now, I don't know about you, but to me it looks like it would last much longer. Again, I'm not sure why they used this from the factory. I need to use heat. Same for the other side. And that is the crankcase ventilation piping all done. All the M120 engines with this early design will need to get this done. I used a 20mm high quality oil line for this. Once it cools down, it's really going to be on there. So if you have an early M120, this is how you do it. Nice and clean on the inside, but not so nice on the outside. So another job for the powder coater. I almost forgot about these engine lifting hooks doubling as coolant passages. There is some corrosion here that no one will ever see, but of course we can't have that. So let's take it apart and these will join the pile. Ancient. O-rings. Now, not everything went according to plan. The powder coating that you saw at the beginning of the video was actually the absolute last thing to get finished, and that's because it took over a month for me to get these parts back, and even then the quality was very questionable, to say the least. This lower oil pan, I took this in for sandblasting. I told them not to blast the inside because I don't want any sand embedded in my lower oil pan where my oil is going to be sitting. What did they do? They sandblasted the inside. So before I took it in for powder coating, it spent a couple of hours in the ultrasonic cleaner to get all the embedded sand out, and there was actually quite a lot of it, surprisingly. Then took it to the powder coater, told him not to paint the inside. What did he do? He painted the inside. So I'll need to have this sandblasted again and paint it myself. And of course the engine lifting brackets are supposed to be silver. They are not silver. So these three parts are something that I'll have to go ahead and finish myself off camera. 70 days was the difference between the last part and this one. Absolutely ridiculous. The last 3 weeks was basically just waiting for the powder coating to get finished. But for the first 40 days or so, I probably worked about an average of 7 days per week, doing all of the research, the studying, the filming, the work itself, the editing, all the stuff behind the scenes. That's about 300 hours, absolutely crazy. The next episodes will come much quicker. Now it's just straight assembly of the engine, nothing really standing in the way. And when it comes to the part after that, part number 5, I was already able to do about half of the work for that part because for the time that I was waiting. So I'm hoping to release the next 2 parts in the next 30 days. That is the goal. Stay tuned.